I'm not the type to post online much. I'm 79, retired, and most of my days are spent tending to my plants, gossiping with the other old birds at the senior center, or knitting things no one really needs. But yesterday, something happened that made me question everything I thought I knew. At 8:12 p.m., my doorbell rang. That alone was strange. I live in a sleepy little town in Oregon where nothing exciting ever happens, and certainly not after dinner time. Most of my neighbors are elderly or asleep by then. But I wasn't scared, just curious. When I opened the door, I nearly dropped dead. Standing there, looking just as bewildered as I felt, was my husband. Not a man who looked like my husband. Not some delusional stranger. No, it was George. The same George who walked out the door on a rainy Tuesday morning in 1985 and never came back. The man who left me with 2 small children, a mortgage, and no explanation. I thought he was dead. The police had found his car abandoned near the cliffs at Devil's Hollow, and after years of searching, they'd closed the case. But there he was, older, a little thinner, hair mostly gray, but unmistakably George. He blinked at me like he couldn't believe I was real. And then he whispered, "Edna?" My knees buckled. If I hadn't grabbed the doorframe, I would have collapsed right there. "George," I rasped. "Is it really you?" He smiled. I think so." I let him in because what else do you do when your dead husband shows up 40 years after disappearing? He sat on the couch like a ghost returning to his own funeral, kept looking around at the photo frames, the knitting basket, the walls he used to paint. I couldn't stop staring at him. His hands. The scar on his chin from when he fell off the roof trying to hang Christmas lights in '78. It was all him. But here's the thing, he didn't look surprised. Not enough. Not like a man who had been gone for 4 decades. More like, he had woken up from a long nap and expected everything to be just how he left it. He didn't ask about our kids. He didn't ask about the world. He didn't ask about what had happened in the last 40 years. Instead, he leaned toward me and said the strangest thing. "I didn't mean to be gone so long. I thought it had only been a few days." I just stared at him. "What?" I said. "I went for a drive, like I always do when I need to think." It started raining hard, and I pulled off near the cliffs. There was this light, blue, almost like lightning but slower. It shimmered. I walked toward it and then, he trailed off. "And then?" I asked, suddenly freezing. "I woke up yesterday in the woods. Same spot. Car's gone. Everything's different. I found a payphone that doesn't work. Walked until I saw the highway. Everything looks wrong." He looked up at me with wide, bloodshot eyes. "Edna, I think I was taken. I didn't sleep at all last night. George is in the guest room. I couldn't bear to sleep next to him. Not yet. Not with a million questions clawing at my brain. I called our daughter Marianne, but couldn't bring myself to tell her. Not yet. How do you even start that conversation? Hey sweetheart, guess who's back from the dead?" But the longer I watched him this morning, his strange habits, the way he picked up a spoon like he wasn't sure how to hold it, the more something started to bother me. This wasn't just someone who'd been missing for a long time. This was someone who wasn't quite right. And I don't just mean his behavior. George was too old. He looked like a man in his 80s, but when he disappeared he was 39. If he really thought only a few days had passed, how the hell did he age 40 years? Something's wrong. Really wrong. And today I found something in his coat pocket that made my blood run cold. A slip of paper. Not old. Clean. White. Folded once. On it, in George's handwriting, were 3 words. "Don't trust me." George doesn't know I found the note. It's still in my nightstand drawer, tucked inside an old envelope from the electric company. I don't know what terrifies me more. The fact that he wrote it, or the possibility that someone else made him write it. Today he asked me what year it was. I told him. He didn't blink. Just nodded slowly, like his brain was processing the math in a different dimension. Then he asked if I still watched The Price is Right. Like nothing had changed. Like we were still in the 80s and Reagan was president, and my knees didn't ache every morning from arthritis. But something else happened today that chilled me to the bone. I left George alone for 20 minutes while I went to pick up my prescriptions from the pharmacy. When I came back, I found him in the basement. Standing in the dark. Facing the wall. Muttering. I didn't know what to say, so I said the only thing that came to mind. "George, what are you doing?" He turned around slowly. His face was completely blank. "Just remembering," he said. I don't think he even realized the lights were off. He came back upstairs like nothing was wrong. Sat on the couch. Started flipping through channels like a normal old man. But I noticed something he didn't expect me to see. His fingernails were dirty. Not like yard work dirty, more like fresh soil under the nails. As if he'd been digging. We don't have a garden anymore. I tore it out 10 years ago when my hip gave out. So what the hell was he digging in the basement? I waited until he fell asleep in the recliner. Then I crept downstairs with a flashlight. The basement hasn't changed much since the 80s. Concrete floor, old shelves, some Christmas decorations, boxes of forgotten junk. But when I reached the back wall where I'd seen him standing earlier, I felt a sudden wave of nausea. There were scratches on the concrete, fingernail marks, tiny lines carved into the wall, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, like someone had been counting. And in the corner, half buried under an old tarp, was something even worse. A shoebox. Inside it, a photo of me and the kids from 1986, faded and torn. A newspaper clipping from 1987 about George's disappearance. And a small, smooth silver key with a strange symbol on it. Something that looked almost like a spiral made of tiny eyes. I've never seen that key before in my life. And I know for a fact those things weren't down here last week. He's watching me now. I can feel it. Not openly, of course. He acts like he's just happy to be home. Like nothing's wrong. But his eyes are too sharp. Too aware. At breakfast he asked me how Marianne was doing. It seemed like a normal question. Until I realized I never told him we had a granddaughter named Marianne. Marianne is our daughter. Our granddaughter's name is Lily. He should have known that. But he didn't. And then he did something else. Something I can't explain. He looked at me over his cup of coffee and said, "Do you remember the bird feeder I made you in '82? I nodded. It was a small wooden feeder he carved himself. I kept it for years, even after it cracked from weather. But then George said, "You buried it behind the rosebush when it broke. You cried. You whispered, 'I miss you.'" I froze. Because yes, I did bury it. I did cry. I did whisper that. But that happened years after he disappeared. I never told anyone about it. That night I tried to act normal. Made his favorite, meatloaf and mashed potatoes. We even watched an old rerun of Columbo. But every time he looked at me, I felt like I was being studied. Like he was trying to remember how to be human. When he went to bed, I poured myself a glass of wine and pulled the shoebox back out. I stared at the key for a long time. It had weight. It wasn't decorative. It meant something. And that spiral symbol, I could swear I'd seen it before. I went digging through George's old stuff in the attic. Most of it was junk, tax papers, letters, useless odds and ends. But then I found something taped inside an old Bible. A map. A hand-drawn map of our property and the woods behind it. A trail marked in red ink. And at the end of the trail, a circle. Next to it, in George's handwriting. Where it started. I don't know what happened to George. I don't know if he's sick or crazy or something far worse. But tomorrow morning, while he's still sleeping, I'm going into those woods. I barely slept. The wind outside howled like it knew something was coming. Every creak of the old house felt amplified, like the walls themselves were trying to warn me. At one point around 3 a.m., I thought I heard the front door open. But when I tiptoed out with the poker from the fireplace, everything was still. Except George. He was standing in the kitchen, just staring out the window into the backyard. His breath fogged up the glass, but he didn't wipe it. Didn't move. Just whispered something to himself I couldn't quite hear. A name maybe? Or a number. I didn't ask. I just backed away and went back to bed. By morning, he was back to normal. Whatever normal means now. He smiled. Made toast. Even offered to go into town to buy milk. As if we hadn't both spent the last 24 hours circling around some bottomless pit neither of us wanted to name. I waited until his car pulled out of the driveway. Then I took the map, the key, a flashlight and a box cutter, just in case, and went into the woods behind the house. The trail was overgrown. Wild branches scratched my arms. And every so often I thought I heard footsteps behind me. But every time I turned, there was nothing. I followed the red line on the map until I reached the circle marked, where it started. It was a clearing. Perfectly round. And wrong. I mean that in the deepest sense. The grass here was dead. The trees around it were twisted. Not broken, just wrong in their shape, like they'd been melted and reformed by something that didn't understand trees. In the center of the clearing was a stone structure. Like a well, but flat on top. A circular hatch of sorts, made of rough gray rock and sealed shut. And on the metal ring around its edge was the same spiral eye symbol from the key. I pulled out the silver key and pressed it into a small indentation in the metal. It fit. With a soft click, the hatch opened. I wasn't ready for what was inside. It wasn't a pit. Not really. It was more like a tunnel. stone-lined, spiraling down into the dark. And from deep within it, I could hear something. A hum. Soft, low, like a machine buried miles underground. And with it something else, a whisper. Not in English. Not in any language I knew. But the voice, it was familiar. It was George. I didn't go in. God help me, I didn't. But I looked down long enough to see something move. A flicker. A shimmer of light that twisted in impossible ways. I slammed the hatch shut and ran all the way home. George was waiting for me. He was sitting on the porch swing like he'd been there all morning, reading a newspaper that was 3 years old. I was breathless, shaking, but he didn't say a word, just folded the paper and smiled. How was your walk? I didn't answer. I went inside, locked the bathroom door, and cried, because now I know something I wish I didn't. That man sitting on my porch isn't really my husband. Later that night, I tested him. I showed him a picture of our wedding day, the one where we're both laughing because the cake had tipped over. He smiled, but he got it wrong. Said it was from our anniversary. Then I asked him where we spent our honeymoon. He hesitated, then said Florida. We never went to Florida. We went to the Catskills. We stayed in a tiny cabin, and George got food poisoning from shrimp cocktail. He should have remembered that. He forgot my birthday. He didn't know we'd lost our dog Rusty in 1991. He called our old neighbor Mr. Tiller, when his name was Mr. Tyler. Whoever this is, they know too much but not enough. Like someone trying to copy George from memory. But the memory's fading, breaking apart. And here's the worst part. When I was in the woods, I took a photo of the hatch with my phone. Tonight, I went to show it to Marianne, finally ready to bring her into this madness. But the photo was gone. Wiped. Only one new image remained in my gallery. A picture of me, sleeping, taken from the foot of my bed. I didn't sleep at all. Not because I was afraid, though I was, but because I kept checking the hallway every few minutes to make sure he was still in the guest room, that the door was still closed, that I was still alone in my skin. Around 4 a.m., I made a decision. If he wasn't George, then maybe, just maybe, George was still out there. Somewhere. Or at least, I needed to know what had taken his place. I started digging through old case files again, stuff I'd saved in a fireproof box years ago. Police reports. Newspaper clippings. There was one article I'd forgotten about entirely. Local man's disappearance mirrors 1973 case. I stared at it for a long time. Wait. What 1973 case? I called in a favor. My cousin's grandson works at the sheriff's department. Still green. Thinks old ladies are harmless. I told him I wanted to revisit old files for closure. He said he'd email me what he could find. What he sent changed everything. Between 1970 and 1995, 11 people went missing within 15 miles of our home. All near the woods. All under strange circumstances. One of them, a teenage girl named Sadie Krantz, was found alive 6 years after she vanished. She hadn't aged a day. But here's the thing that made my stomach churn. She kept repeating one phrase, over and over again, until the day she died in an asylum. The spiral watches. The spiral wants. The spiral takes. I nearly dropped the iPad. Because that symbol, the spiral with eyes, it's the exact same one that's on George's key. I needed answers. And not just from files. I needed to go back. But I couldn't do it alone. So I did something reckless. I messaged someone I hadn't spoken to in 27 years. Ruth. She used to be my best friend. Until she told me something I never believed. Back in '89, she said she saw a man in the woods. Not just any man. George. Except she swore his eyes weren't human. That they moved wrong. That they blinked sideways. I called her crazy. We fought. We never spoke again. Until now. Ruth picked up on the second ring. There was silence at first. Then her voice, flat and tight. You've seen him too, haven't you? I didn't even have to say it. We met at the old gas station outside town. She looked older, grayer, but her eyes were sharp. Furious. She handed me a box without saying a word. Inside it. A camera. A tattered notebook. A drawing of something that made my heart lurch violently. The drawing showed a man's face, except it wasn't right. The skin was peeling, like cheap wallpaper. Beneath it, something with too many eyes. Spirals instead of pupils. A mouthful of black teeth. And written in block letters underneath. When it takes their face, they forget who they were. Ruth came back with me to the woods. I showed her the hatch. She didn't flinch. Just whispered, "It's bigger now." She said there were others. That something ancient lives beneath the forest. Not a creature, Not exactly. Not even a being. A shape. A hunger. A memory that eats people. It doesn't just mimic. It steals. And the more it watches someone, the better it becomes at wearing them. George was gone the moment he saw that light 40 years ago. The thing that came back. It's not wearing his skin. It's wearing his soul. Then Ruth did something that made my blood run cold. She took out her camera, pointed it at the hatch and said, "Smile." The flash went off, but the light didn't stop. Something shimmered in the clearing. The hatch began to move, slowly turning, clicking open again. A gust of air blew upward from below. Cold, but not like winter. Cold like depth. And then, a hand reached out. Not human. Too long. Too thin. Skin like tree bark. Nails like bone. It gripped the edge of the hatch. Ruth grabbed my arm. "Run," she whispered. "Don't look back. It knows your name now." We ran. Branches tore at our clothes. The forest groaned behind us. Something followed. Not footsteps, not breathing, just this awareness crawling along the back of my neck like ice water down my spine. When we reached my house, we slammed the door shut and locked every window. And that's when I realized something. The house was dark. Too dark. George had turned off all the lights. He was waiting in the kitchen, sitting in the chair, perfectly still, head tilted, smiling, too wide. "Did you have fun, Edna?" I didn't answer. I couldn't move. And then his voice changed. Low. Guttural. "Wrong. You shouldn't have opened it." Ruth stepped forward, held up her camera. Flash. George screamed. Not like a man screams. Like wood splitting. He collapsed to the floor, convulsing. And for a second, just a second, his skin flickered. Something else looked back at us. Something that wore my husband like a costume it had forgotten how to button up. Then it was gone. Just George again. Lying still. Eyes open. Not breathing. He died on the kitchen floor at 11:47 p.m. At least his body did. But before we could call anyone, before Ruth could even check his pulse, we both heard it. A soft knock at the back door. 3 slow taps. I opened the curtain. And outside was George. Smiling. Wet. Naked. Holding a bird feeder in his hands. We didn't sleep. Ruth and I sat at the kitchen table in silence while George, or whatever it was, stood outside the back door. Just watching. He never knocked again. Never moved. Just stood there, his soaked body shivering slightly, that bird feeder dangling from his hand like some grotesque peace offering. At sunrise he was gone. But the feeder was still there. Hanging from the back porch. Exactly where George had put it 43 years ago. Except it wasn't weathered. It was new. Untouched. Smooth. Like someone had rebuilt it from memory. Ruth wanted to burn it. I wanted to scream. Instead I made tea. That's what you do when your world collapses and you're almost 80. You make tea. While we drank in silence, Ruth opened the old notebook she'd given me. She flipped to a page I hadn't seen yet. It was covered in dates. Most were crossed out. Next to each was a name. Only 3 weren't crossed out. Edna D. George D. Lily M. I stared at the last one for a long, long time. "Lily," I whispered. "That's my granddaughter." Ruth didn't blink. "It wants the bloodline." I laughed. I actually laughed, like some deranged widow in a bad play. But Ruth didn't. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "It doesn't want you, Edna. It wants what came through you. And it already got part of it." George was just the first. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. That this was just dementia or trauma or some cruel cosmic joke. But deep inside me, beneath the fear, beneath the exhaustion, I felt something else rising. Memory. A memory I hadn't thought about in 40 years. Because I buried it. It was 1984. A year before George disappeared. We were fighting a lot that year. Stress. Money. I was drinking more than I should have. One night, during a storm, I went into the woods. I don't remember why. I think I wanted to disappear for a while. That's where I saw it. Just for a second. A spiral of light, floating between the trees. It pulsed. It looked at me. And then I passed out. When I came to, I was lying in the clearing. I told George I'd slipped and hit my head. I convinced myself that was the truth. But 3 weeks later, George started sleepwalking. And whispering strange words in his sleep. And talking to our daughter like she was someone else. And then one day, he vanished. I told Ruth everything. She listened, then nodded slowly. "It marked you," she said. "And it used George to come through." Come through where? Here. This world. Our timeline. But it needs vessels. Hosts. You gave it one. I wanted to argue, but the more I tried to deny it, the more I remembered. George waking up with bleeding eyes. George building things in the basement he didn't remember later. George crying in the shower and saying, "It's looking through me." It had started long before he disappeared, and it had never really left. That night, I heard my granddaughter's voice. But Lily wasn't here. She was hundreds of miles away, asleep in her dorm room. The voice came from inside the house. Soft. Clear. "Grandma? Are you awake?" I opened the bedroom door, my hands shaking. There was no one there. Just the dark hallway. And a low hum from the basement. Ruth grabbed her camera. We went down together. The humming was louder now. Rhythmic. Hypnotic. Behind the old boiler, we found something new. A door. A door that wasn't there before. Carved into the wall. Not built. Grown. Its frame was made of wood, but the wood pulsed slightly, like veins under skin. The spiral symbol was burned into the center. The handle was made of bone. Ruth stepped back. "This isn't part of your house." And then, from behind the door, we heard George's voice. "Edna, come see. She's here." She came early. I nearly dropped the flashlight, because that voice didn't sound like him anymore. It sounded like me. I stood there, one hand on the bone handle, staring at the door grown into the wall of my own home. The door that shouldn't exist. Behind me, Ruth whispered, "Don't." But I already had. The handle was warm. The door pulsed once beneath my palm, like it was breathing. And then, it opened. No creak. No scream. Just silence and darkness. So complete it felt like I was being pulled into the mouth of something ancient. I didn't step through. The floor simply disappeared. The fall wasn't painful. It was slow. Dreamlike. Like drifting through oil or smoke. I couldn't see, couldn't hear, but I felt everything. Memories I hadn't touched in decades flickered past me like candle flames. The birth of our daughter. The night George proposed. The moment I first saw the spiral in the woods. But then they turned wrong. The birth became a screaming void. The proposal, a mouthful of worms. The spiral, no longer a light, but an eye. And then, I landed. The ground wasn't ground. It was soft, fleshy, pulsing underfoot like the inside of a throat. Above me, no sky, just swirling spirals of black and red. Spinning slowly like some massive eye trying to remember how to blink. And all around me, doors. Thousands of them. Some made of bone, some of metal, some of things I don't have words for. All gently vibrating. All whispering. "She's here. She's come back. She brought the blood." I started to walk, unsure of direction, but drawn forward anyway. The spiral was everywhere now, carved into the walls, moving like water, like thought. It wasn't a symbol. It was alive. And the whispers kept following me. "Edna. Edna. Edna. You fed us. You opened the first gate. You brought us George. You will bring us Lily." I screamed. I told them to shut up. That I didn't mean to. That I didn't even know what I'd done. And the spiral answered. "That's what makes you perfect." I found him. George. Or at least, what was left of him. He was standing in the middle of a room made of shifting walls. His face was intact, but his body was stretched wrong. His limbs moved in ways that hurt to look at. His eyes were gone. In their place, tiny spirals spinning inward. "Edna," he said. "You came." I asked him what this place was. He smiled sadly. "This is where they keep the ones who almost remembered." They showed me everything. How time loops. How people are doors. How identity is just a costume. And how you, he pointed at me with a finger that was now 6 inches too long, opened it for them. He told me the truth. That the spiral isn't a creature. It's a pattern. A thought that infects reality itself. It started as a symbol, then a whisper, then a memory. And now it's a place. It latches onto people who feel empty. People like me. I was broken long before George disappeared. I just didn't know it. He told me I gave it an opening the moment I stepped into the clearing in 1984, and that it has been watching my family ever since. Then he begged me to do something unthinkable. Burn the house. Burn the door. Burn Lily's name from the world. It can't take what no longer exists. I couldn't speak. And then he started to scream, because the walls around us began to collapse inward, spiraling faster, faster, devouring themselves. And through the spiral, something began to come through. Not a shape. Not a person. A voice. My voice. "I am Edna. I remember the spiral. I am the door now. I am the spiral's gift." And then, I woke up. I was back in the basement. lying on the cold floor. Ruth was beside me, shaking me, tears in her eyes. "You were gone for 6 hours, Edna." I touched my face. It was wet, but not from tears. Ink. Black, spiraling ink dripping from my eyes. And on the wall, written in thick, swirling lines. I brought it back with me. I didn't tell Lily. I wanted to. I sat with the phone in my hand for an hour, trying to dial. But what do you even say? "Hi, sweetheart. Grandma went to another dimension last night and found your dead grandfather who now has spiral eyes and told me you're next. Hope classes are going well." I couldn't do it. So I just stared out the window while the world bent around me. Literally. Because things aren't staying still anymore. This morning, the wallpaper in the hallway began to move. Not peel. Move. The floral pattern twisted slowly into a spiral, turning on its own like some invisible hand was spinning the walls. I blinked, and it stopped. Then I looked down. My hands. Lines were forming across my skin. Ink-black spirals curling outward from my veins like vines. They vanish when Ruth looks at me, but they always come back when I'm alone. Like it wants me to know. "You are mine now." We tried to burn the bird feeder. Ruth and I took it into the fireplace. We poured lighter fluid on it and struck a match. The fire burned for exactly 3 seconds. Then it turned blue, cold, humming, and the flames began to swirl backwards. The feeder didn't burn. It just disappeared. As if it had never been. We went back into the basement. The door was still there. But now more doors had appeared around it. Etched into the walls, the floor, the ceiling. Dozens. Hundreds. Some were tiny. Some were person-sized. Some breathed. And then we heard a phone ring. Ruth and I looked at each other. It wasn't her phone. Not mine either. It was coming from inside the door. It rang again. And again. And on the 7th ring, it spoke instead of ringing. In Lily's voice. "Grandma, can you hear me?" I ran. Out of the house. Into the yard. Into the road. Barefoot. Wild. I screamed so hard I almost blacked out. And when I looked up, all the trees were bending. Not from wind. They were bowing. Facing my house. Facing me. Ruth caught up with me. She had her camera. She said she had a plan. "I think light is the only thing that hurts it," she said. Flash. Truth. Anything it can't twist. We decided to drive to Lily's college that night. Just to check. To see if it was too late. But before we left, Ruth gave me something. An envelope. "If I don't make it, you use this," she said. Inside was a photograph. Black and white. Old. Of me. But younger. And behind me, just barely visible in the blur. The spiral. We made it 2 towns over before the spiral followed us. It started with static on the radio. Then the headlights flickered. Then the road split. Literally like glass cracking under pressure. The line down the middle curled into a spiral. And the asphalt melted into ink. We drove off the road. Crashed into a ditch. When I came to, Ruth was gone. The driver's seat was empty. But her camera was still there. And on the screen was a single photo of Ruth, standing in the road, with me standing behind her. But I hadn't been standing. I was in the car. Except the other me was smiling, with no eyes. I screamed. I ran. I walked for miles, barefoot, bleeding, not knowing what direction I was going. And then I saw it. A spiral of birds in the sky, circling like vultures. And beneath them, a motel. I broke in, collapsed in the bathtub, slept for 6 hours. When I woke up, there was a knock on the door. Soft. Familiar. And when I opened it, it was Lily, standing there in her pajamas. Eyes wide. Pale. Confused. "Grandma," she said. "I don't know how I got here." She looked exactly like my Lily. Same soft curls. Same big brown eyes. Same pink pajamas with the sleepy cat on the front. But something was wrong. She didn't blink enough. And when I hugged her, she didn't smell right. We sat on the motel bed. The silence stretching between us like a rubber band on the verge of snapping. She held my hand. Her fingers were cold. "I had a dream," she said. "I was inside a hallway made of skin. And you were there. You said I should open a door." I smiled, but it was the kind of smile you make when you're standing in front of a wild animal and hoping it won't bite. "What happened when you opened it?" I asked. She looked at me. "I didn't. Because you changed. Your mouth opened too wide." I asked her if she remembered how she got here. She shook her head. "I just woke up in the parking lot." "But Grandma," when I looked up, the moon had a spiral in it. I couldn't hide my fear anymore. I pulled out Ruth's camera and aimed it at Lily. Flash. Her eyes flinched. For a second, just a second, I saw it. Not in her eyes. Behind them. The spiral. Turning. I went to the bathroom and locked the door. I needed time to think. To breathe. To cry. I took out the photo Ruth had given me. The one with my younger self. The one where the spiral was lurking behind me, already watching. And I realized something. The spiral had never been after Lily. It had always been growing inside my family. Like cancer in the bloodline. Like memory passed down. Like a seed. And Lily? She wasn't being attacked. She was being born. I stepped out of the bathroom. She was gone. The motel door was open. Outside, the parking lot was melting. The asphalt was a black whirlpool, spiraling outward, turning the world into ink. Street lamps twisted like corkscrews. Cars melted into bone. And in the center of it all, Lily, spinning slowly, her eyes fully black now. No whites. No irises. Just endless spiral. You brought me here, she said. You're the first door. And now I'm the last. I begged her. I screamed her name. But her voice was layered now. Hers and mine. And George's. All together. It's not possession, she said. It's remembering. And then she held out her hand. Come with me, Grandma. We can be part of the pattern forever. I took a step forward. And stopped. Because I saw Ruth's camera in the motel window. Still on. Still flashing red. Still recording. She had set it to auto-flash. One picture every 3 seconds. Flash. Lily flinched. Just a twitch. Barely noticeable. But I saw it. She wasn't immune. I ran back. Grabbed the camera. Pointed it at Lily. I'm sorry, I said. For all of it. But you don't get her. Flash. 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 She screamed. But not with her own voice. She screamed with 100 mouths. From inside her skin. From the asphalt. From me. And then, the world collapsed inward. Everything folded. Colors inverted. The spiral tried to undo itself. And we fell. I woke up in the woods. Same clearing. Same spot. Next to the well-like hatch. Only it was closed again. And Lily, lying next to me. Her eyes normal. Breathing. Human. We walked home in silence. My hands are burned. Not from fire. From holding the camera too long. The spiral hates being seen. It only lives when it's hidden. And now, it's hiding again. But not forever. Because this morning, Lily woke up and said something. Something that made my heart stop cold. Grandma. Who's Ruth? I never told her that name. Not once. I woke up to beeping. A steady, monotonous sound. The kind that drills into your brain until you don't know what's real anymore. I opened my eyes. The room was white. Too white. Too clean. Machines hummed around me. Tubes ran from my arms. And I was lying in a hospital bed. A man in a white coat smiled gently. Mrs. Edna, you've been in a coma for 40 years. 40 years. The weight of the words hit me harder than any nightmare. The spiral. George. Lily. All of it. A dream. A long dream. I tried to speak. My voice was hoarse. He continued. You were in an accident in 1984. The doctors thought you wouldn't survive. But your mind, your subconscious, created a world to keep you alive. I closed my eyes. The spiral in the woods. The doors. The voices. They were all inside me. Memories twisted into nightmares. Time folding like a broken record. And then, the man said something else. Your daughter Lily passed away years ago. But your mind made her live. Made her a part of your story. Tears rolled down my cheeks. I was grieving for a life I never truly had. I opened my eyes again. The hospital room was filled with shadows. But I wasn't alone. A small figure sat beside me, holding my hand. My daughter. My Lily. I'm here, Grandma, she whispered. And for the first time in decades, I felt peace. Because maybe the spiral wasn't a curse. Maybe it was my mind's way of holding on. I smiled and closed my eyes. I woke up to the sound of steady beeping. It was soft yet relentless, like a heartbeat that wouldn't stop. My eyes fluttered open, and the world around me was washed in sterile white light. The air smelled clean but cold. Tubes and wires tangled around my arms, and a steady hum filled the room. I was lying in a hospital bed. A man in a white coat stood beside me, his face kind and calm. Mrs. Edna, he said gently. You've been in a coma for 40 years. 40 years. The words echoed in my mind like a thunderclap. My heart hammered, but my body felt heavy, like it had been asleep for an eternity. Images flooded back. spirals twisting in the woods, the doors that breathed, George's face shifting in the dark, Lily's eyes full of something I couldn't name. I whispered, "Was it all a dream?" The doctor nodded slowly. "Yes. Your mind created a whole world inside your subconscious. A place to hold you while your body rested." I blinked, trying to hold on to that thought. A world made from memories, fears, and hope. A place I had lived in for decades without ever leaving. Tears welled up, but they were not sorrowful. They were healing. Because the truth settled on me gently. I had survived. Somehow. Though my body had been still, my mind had fought, built, and held on. And in that mind, I had met my family again. I had seen George not as a ghost, but as love. I had held Lily's hand. And now, I was awake. A soft hand squeezed mine. I turned my head and saw a woman smiling at me. Her eyes were bright, warm, familiar. "Grandma," she said. "It's me, Lily." My heart skipped a beat. Not the Lily from my dreams, but real flesh and blood. She was grown now. A woman I never got to watch grow. Her hand was real, and so was her smile. I tried to speak, but words tangled in my throat. Lily leaned closer. "I've been waiting for you to wake up." The room felt less cold, the light softer. The spiral was gone. Only us. In the days that followed, I learned how much had changed. The world had moved on without me. But Lily stayed by my side. She told me stories, of her life, her dreams, her fears. And I told her mine, the stories from the spiral world, the doors, the voices. She listened, wide-eyed. Then she smiled. "Maybe it was your way of staying strong," she said. And I nodded. One afternoon, I sat by the window, watching the sunlight dance on the floor. For a moment, I thought I saw a faint spiral pattern in the dust. I smiled quietly, because the spiral wasn't a curse. It was a part of me, a symbol of endurance, of love that doesn't fade. I reached for Lily's hand. She took it without hesitation. And for the first time in a lifetime, I felt whole. The nightmare was over. The spiral had led me home. The beeping woke me first. A steady, mechanical rhythm that I had never heard before. But somehow it felt familiar, like the pulse of the world calling me back. I opened my eyes slowly, blinking against the harsh, white light flooding the room. Everything was sterile, cold. There were wires and tubes attached to my arms and chest. I was lying in a hospital bed. My body felt heavy and foreign, as if I were waking from the longest sleep imaginable. A man in a white coat was standing beside me. His face was kind, gentle. "Mrs. Edna," he said softly, "you've been in a coma for 40 years. I swallowed hard, trying to process the words. 40 years. The world outside had changed. But I had not. The images I had lived through, all the spirals, the endless doors, George's face changing in the dark, Lily's pale eyes, came rushing back in a tidal wave of memories. I whispered, voice cracking, "Was it all a dream?" He nodded. "Yes. Your subconscious created an entire world inside your mind, to keep you alive during your coma." Tears pricked my eyes. Not of sadness, but relief. Because that world, no matter how strange or terrifying, had been my refuge, my battle, my hope. I tried to move, but my limbs were weak, unfamiliar. The doctor smiled encouragingly. "We'll help you regain strength. You're lucky to be here." I wanted to believe him. Then, something soft brushed my hand. I turned my head and saw her. Lily. Not the ghostly girl from the dreams, but a woman. Beautiful, grown real. Her eyes were warm, her smile full of love and patience. "Grandma," she said, "I've been waiting for you." My heart ached in a way I couldn't explain. This was the Lily I never got to watch grow up. The one I had dreamed of and feared losing. She squeezed my hand gently. And suddenly, the sterile hospital room felt less cold. Less lonely. Days passed like a dream within a dream. I relearned how to move, how to speak. Lily stayed by my side, telling me stories about the world I had missed. Her childhood, her dreams, her life without me. I told her about the spiral, the doors, George, how love and fear had twisted into something strange and powerful in my mind. She listened with wide eyes, sometimes squeezing my hand. One afternoon, we sat by the window. Sunlight poured through the glass, making patterns on the floor. I looked down and thought I saw a faint spiral in the dust. I smiled quietly. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks. Or maybe, the spiral wasn't a curse. It was a symbol of survival, of endurance, of love that never dies. Lily looked at me and said softly, "Maybe your mind created the spiral to keep you strong, to help you hold on." I nodded. Yes. And for the first time in decades, I felt peace. I reached for Lily's hand. She took it without hesitation. And in that moment I knew. The nightmare was over. The spiral had led me home. The first thing I heard was the steady, rhythmic beeping. It was sharp and mechanical, unlike anything I'd heard before. Yet somehow it felt like a heartbeat calling me back from the void. My eyelids felt like heavy curtains, pulling apart slowly. When I finally opened my eyes, a blinding white light washed over me. The room was sterile, cold, and silent except for the relentless beep. I was lying down, completely still. Tubes and wires snaked across my arms and chest, tethering me to machines humming softly around me. I tried to move, but my body refused to obey. It felt weak, unfamiliar, as though I'd been asleep for a century or longer. A man in a white coat stood beside me. His face was soft with kindness and gentle concern. He looked down at me, waiting patiently as I blinked a few times to clear the fog from my mind. "Mrs. Edna," he said with a calm voice, "you've been in a coma for 40 years. 40 years. The words echoed inside my skull, reverberating with a strange mix of disbelief and a numb ache. 40 years of silence. 40 years of darkness. The spiral. George's face in the shadows. Lily's pale eyes staring back at me. All those memories, vivid and strange, were swirling inside my mind like a storm. I whispered, my throat dry and cracking. "Was it all a dream?" The doctor nodded slowly, his eyes softening. "Yes. Your mind created a complex world inside your subconscious to keep you alive. It's a defense mechanism, a sanctuary." Tears welled up in my eyes, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of relief, healing, and hope. Because that strange, terrifying place I had lived in for what felt like decades, it was not real. But it was mine. My mind had fought to survive, creating worlds, memories, and people to hold on to when everything else was slipping away. Days passed slowly. My body was fragile, but my spirit was waking. Lily was there every day. Not the ghostly little girl from my dreams, but a woman. A real woman with warmth in her eyes and softness in her smile. She sat by my bedside, telling me stories about the world that moved on without me. Her childhood, her struggles, her triumphs. I told her about the spiral, the doors, George, the love and fear tangled inside my mind. She listened intently, sometimes squeezing my hand when my voice trembled. One evening, as the sun dipped low and spilled golden light across the hospital room, I sat beside the window, watching the light dance on the floor. For a moment, I thought I saw a faint spiral pattern in the dust on the windowsill. I smiled quietly to myself. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks. Or maybe the spiral was something more. A symbol of survival, of strength, of love that never truly dies. Lily looked at me then, her eyes full of tenderness. "Maybe," she said softly, "the spiral wasn't a curse. Maybe it was your mind's way of staying strong, of holding on when everything was lost." I nodded, feeling a warmth spread through me. "Yes," I whispered. "It was my anchor, my way back."